Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about Anne Frank.
And Frank, yeah.
But we're not really focusing on the Holocaust today. Instead, we're going to be looking at her writings about happiness.
Right. Happiness amidst some of the darkest circumstances imaginable. It's an
Exactly.
incredible testament to uh,
The human spirit.
the human spirit, yeah.
Her diary is so powerful. It gives us this like roadmap for finding joy even when things are really hard.
You know what's so interesting is we often think of happiness as something that's like dependent on our external circumstances.
Right. Like if good things are happening to me, then I'll be happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Anne's story totally flips that on its head.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from her diary is, "I don't think of all the misery, but of the beauty that still remains."
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. It really shows that she believed happiness was a choice.
A choice, yeah, not just something that happens to you.
And she really lived that belief every single day, even in hiding.
Okay, so she didn't just like hope to be happy, she actively pursued it.
Exactly. She was very intentional about it.
So what did that look like for her? I mean, what did she actually do?
Well, one thing she did was keep a gratitude list.
Oh, like a diary of things she was thankful for.
Yeah, exactly. She'd write down even the smallest things that brought her joy, like a cup of tea or the sound of birds chirping.
It's amazing to think about those tiny details bringing her comfort in such a difficult situation.
Right. And she also wrote about how sunlight streaming through the attic window brought her peace.
Oh, wow. I can picture that little ray of sunshine in that cramped annex. It must have felt like a lifeline.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about appreciating those moments passively. She actively sought out beauty in her surroundings.
That's so interesting because it's like she understood that happiness wouldn't just magically appear.
Right. She had to create it. She had to train her mind to look for those sparks of joy.
So it was like a daily practice for her.
Absolutely.
I love that idea that happiness is something you cultivate rather than something you wait for.
It's empowering, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. It's like taking control of your own well-being.
And you know, one of the things that fascinates me about Anne's diary is how her perspective on happiness actually evolves over time.
Oh, how
Well,
so?
at the beginning, there's a lot of that youthful enthusiasm,
Yeah. Yeah, lots of excitement about simple pleasures.
Exactly. Things like getting lost in a good book or daydreaming about the future.
Makes sense she was only 13 when she went into hiding.
Right. But then as the situation in the annex becomes more tense, as the reality of their circumstances really sets in, her writing about happiness takes on a deeper meaning.
So it's not just about those surface level joys anymore?
Right, she starts to grapple with more complex ideas like inner strength and finding meaning in the midst of suffering.
It's like the longer she's in hiding, the more she has to dig deep to find that happiness.
Exactly, and you see that reflected in her writing. She talks about fear and uncertainty. She even expresses moments of despair. But she always seems to come back to this core belief.
That even in the darkest times, there's still beauty to be found?
Yes,
Yeah.
if you choose to look for it.
It's so powerful that she never loses sight of that.
You know, it wasn't just blind optimism on her part either. She acknowledged the darkness around her, but she consciously chose to focus on the light.
That takes real strength, and it's a really powerful message for us today, I think.
I agree. In a world that can often feel so negative and overwhelming, Anne's story reminds us that we have the power to choose where we focus our attention.
Exactly. We can't always control our circumstances, but we can control our mindset.
And that can make all the difference.
Now, speaking of challenging circumstances, I think one of the most incredible and frankly mind-boggling things about Anne's story is her unwavering faith in humanity.
It's hard to wrap your head around, isn't it?
Seriously, I mean, she was literally surrounded by the worst of humanity, and yet she still believed in the good.
Right. It seems almost impossible, doesn't it?
How could she possibly hold on to that belief in those circumstances?
It's a question that really gets to the heart of Anne's character and her perspective on the world.
Yeah, I'm really curious to unpack that more and explore what it means for us today.
Me too. I think there's a lot we can learn from Anne's ability to see the good, even in the darkest of times.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more after a quick break. I think it's easy to look back and say, oh, she was just naive, you know?
Yeah, especially knowing what we know now.
But when you actually read her diary, it's clear that her faith in humanity wasn't about ignoring the bad stuff happening around her.
Right, it was about actively choosing to see the good,
Mm.
even when it was hard to find.
And I think that's really important to remember because it's easy to get caught up in the negativity of the world.
Absolutely.
And you can see this choice reflected in her relationships with the people she was hiding with in the annex.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
She definitely had her moments of frustration and disagreements with them.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Right. They were all under immense pressure, living in such close quarters for so long.
But even in those moments of tension, Anne always tried to find common ground.
Yeah, she always looked for the best in people.
She understood the human connection was so important, especially in those dark times.
It's like even when the world felt like it was falling apart, those relationships were a source of strength and joy for her.
You know, it's interesting to think about whether her belief in people actually helped sustain her hope.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Well, if you believe that there's good in the world, even if it's hidden, maybe it makes it easier to believe that things will eventually get better.
Hmm. That's a really good point. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Right, and it connects to another important aspect of Anne's story, her unwavering belief in a brighter future.
Oh, yeah, even in those darkest moments, she never gave up hope for a world without hate, a world where she could be free.
Exactly, and that hope gave her something to strive for.
It's like those dreams for the future gave her the strength to keep going in the present.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about some of her diary entries where she talks about wanting to be a writer to travel the world.
Yeah, to experience all that life had to offer.
And those dreams weren't just fantasies, they were fuel for her spirit.
They gave her a sense of purpose and direction, even when her present reality was so limited.
It's a powerful reminder that hope for the future can really sustain us in the present.
Couldn't agree more.
You know, it's amazing how much Anne's story resonates with us today, even though her circumstances were so unique.
Right.
We're not facing Nazi persecution, but we all have our own challenges, our own moments of darkness.
That's the beauty of Anne's message. It transcends time and circumstance.
It reminds us that the human capacity for resilience and finding joy in the face of hardship is universal.
No matter what we're going through, we all have the potential to find that inner strength.
So if we're trying to apply Anne's lessons to our own lives, what are some practical takeaways?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that happiness is a choice, not a passive state of being.
Okay, so it's not about waiting for happiness to find us.
Right. It's about actively creating it for ourselves, just like Anne did.
So how do we do that?
Well, for one, we can start a gratitude practice like Anne did.
Yeah, make a list of things we're thankful for every day.
Exactly. Even the small things can make a big difference.
And it's also about nurturing our relationships, right?
Absolutely. Human connection is essential for well-being.
And setting goals for the future, even small ones, can give us a sense of purpose.
It's about finding healthy ways to process our emotions, to express ourselves creatively.
Just like Anne did with her writing.
Her diary was her outlet, her way of making sense of the world and finding strength within herself.
It's like she was saying, hey, even when everything feels like it's falling apart, I still have the power to choose how I react, how I feel, how I experience this moment.
And that's incredibly empowering.
It reminds us that we have agency. We have the power to choose how we show up in the world.
Even in the face of forces beyond our control.
You know, it really makes you realize that Anne Frank's legacy isn't just about remembering the horrors of the Holocaust.
It's about celebrating the resilience of the human spirit.
The power of hope and the potential for good even in the darkest of times.
So well said.
But I think it's important to acknowledge the elephant in the room here.
You mean the fact that her story ultimately ended in tragedy?
Yeah. It's hard to talk about Anne's belief in goodness, her unwavering hope, without acknowledging the horrific reality of her fate.
It makes you question how we can reconcile her optimism with the fact that she was a victim of such unimaginable cruelty.
It feels almost wrong to talk about finding happiness when you think about what happened to Anne and millions of others during the Holocaust.
It's a question that so many people have grappled with for decades.
How can we reconcile such profound suffering with the idea that there's goodness in the world?
I don't think there's an easy answer,
Me neither.
but I think it's important to remember that Anne's story, while tragic, isn't just about victimhood.
It's also a testament to the human spirit's ability to persevere, to find meaning, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. So we can't let the darkness overshadow the light that she represents.
Exactly. Anne's story challenges us to hold both truths, the reality of suffering and the enduring possibility of hope.
It's not about ignoring the bad, but about choosing to focus on the good that persists even in the darkest of times.
And in a way, isn't that what Anne did? Even in hiding, facing an uncertain future, she chose to see the beauty around her, to believe in the goodness of people.
It's like she was saying, look, even though terrible things are happening, there's still good in the world, and I'm going to hold on to that.
And that's what makes her story so enduringly powerful.
It reminds us that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the human spirit can still choose hope, can still choose love. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Anne Frank's inspiring perspective on happiness, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away?
I think Anne's diary teaches us that happiness is a choice we make moment by moment, even amidst hardship.
It's about cultivating gratitude, nurturing connections, finding beauty in unexpected places, and holding on to hope for a brighter future.
It's about remembering that even though Anne's story ended tragically, her spirit, her message of hope and resilience continues to live on.
And her legacy challenges each of us to consider. How can we, inspired by Anne's example, choose to see the good in others, to believe in the possibility of a better world, even when faced with negativity and conflict?
That's a powerful question.
And one that I hope will stay with our listeners long after this deep dive is over. Thanks for joining us. It's a question that so many people have grappled with for decades.
Yeah, how can we reconcile such profound suffering with this idea that there's good in the world?
I don't think there's an easy answer.
No, not at all. But I think it's important to remember that Anne's story, while tragic, isn't just about victimhood.
It's also a testament to the human spirit's ability to persevere.
To find meaning even when faced with unimaginable cruelty.
So we can't let the darkness overshadow the light that she represents.
Exactly. Anne's story challenges us to hold both truths, the reality of suffering and the enduring possibility of hope.
It's not about ignoring the bad, but about choosing to focus on the good that persists even in the darkest of times.
And, in a way, isn't that what Anne did? Even in hiding, facing an uncertain future, she chose to see the beauty around her, to believe in the goodness of people.
It's like she was saying, look, even though terrible things are happening, there's still good in the world.
And I'm going to hold on to that.
And that's what makes her story so enduringly powerful.
It reminds us that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the human spirit can still choose. Hope can still choose love.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Anne Frank's inspiring perspective on happiness, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think Anne's diary teaches us that happiness is a choice we make moment by moment, even amidst hardship.
It's about cultivating gratitude, nurturing connections, finding beauty in unexpected places, and holding on to hope for a brighter future.
It's about remembering that even though Anne's story ended tragically, her spirit, her message of hope and resilience continues to live on.
And her legacy challenges each of us to consider. How can we, inspired by Anne's example, choose to see the good in others, to believe in the possibility of a better world, even when faced with negativity and conflict?
That's a really powerful question.
And one that I hope will stay with our listeners long after this deep dive is over. Thanks for joining us.